This week, one of our foci is on GDP. And what I want to go over with you here in the next several minutes is simply to look at math fundamentals as it pertains to our gross domestic product, or more commonly just referred to as GDP. This is a graph that is on your lesson for week 4. But the thing that I want to make very, very clear here is that GDP, as indicated in the narrative below the graph, is defined as consumption, net investment, government spending, exports minus imports. If we sum up the 4 components, those components will give us GDP. Now, why is this significant? Well, let's look at the chart here, and you can see that the yellow line is really our nominal GDP, and our nominal GDP right now today stands in excess of $14 trillion. And what this is giving us is really the growth rate of GDP year over year, and you can see going back to 1994, so we can track the growth rate between 94 and 95, 95, 96, etc., all the way to the end of the year 2010. And if you just look at this, you can see that, okay, it's been, 6%. It dipped down here below 0. Of course, that was our recession, which resulted from the debacle back in latter part of 07 and going into 08. However, when we look at the blue line, and the blue line is looking at federal deficits as a percentage of GDP. Federal deficits as a percentage of GDP. Our current federal deficit simply means we are spending more than what we're taking in as a percentage of GDP, is hovering pretty close to 12%. Now, when we get into fiscal policy and monetary policy, we'll be a little bit more explicit, but for right now, all what I want you to remember is that this blue line is simply measuring our federal deficit. Our federal deficit in relation to our GDP is pretty close to 12%. Well, if we would exclude deficit spending, right now government is spending more than what it's taking in. That's a deficit that has to be made up. And if we just presuppose that we don't have a deficit, it's gone. What we take in, what the government takes in, that is what it spends. This is what GDP would actually be. That's the red line, and you can see it's pretty close to a negative growth of 8%. And that is what I want you to focus in on. If we decrease any one of our individual components, that's going to cause GDP to decline. So if government spending decreases, GDP must go down. Or if we increase taxes, consumption goes down. We do one or two things with disposable income. Disposable income is after taxes. We either consume it or we save it. Keep that in mind. If we increase taxes, your disposable income, that is what you have available to spend, goes down. If that goes down, GDP goes down. So the whole premise here of just kind of focusing in on math fundamentals for GDP is just to get you to think about these individual components. What happens to these these individual components will have a major impact on our gross domestic product. So if government spending goes down, GDP goes down. If C goes down, GDP goes down.